Today we're going to be discussing the urinary system, which the information can be found in chapters 10, 27, and 28 of your textbook. The first couple of slides are the combining forms, the suffixes, and abbreviations related to the urinary system. The urinary system helps regulate the volume and composition of body fluids. As cells carry out metabolic activities, they produce waste products such as water and carbon dioxide. The body also produces urea and other nitrogen waste products as it processes excess nutrients such as amino acids. It is the job of the urinary system to excrete these metabolic waste products. If they were allowed to accumulate, they could reach toxic concentrations. Another function of the urinary system is to maintain the electrolyte balance. Electrolytes are substances that are dissolved in water. For instance, sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium are electrolytes. Sodium is needed for fluid balance. The body retains water if sodium is high. Loss of sodium through vomiting, diarrhea, or medications can result in dehydration. Potassium is needed for the proper functioning of skeletal and cardiac muscles. Calcium and magnesium are needed for normal nerve and muscle function and for bone and teeth formation. There's more information on electrolytes on a future slide. The urinary system is also responsible for maintaining acid-base balance. A pH scale measures if a substance is acidic, neutral, or basic. A pH of 7 is neutral. Anything below 7 is acidic. Anything above 7 is basic. The blood must remain within a certain pH range, which is 7.35 to 7.45 for normal body function. The urinary system also secretes renin and erythropoietin. Renin is an enzyme that is important for regulating blood pressure. Erythropoietin is the hormone that regulates the production of red blood cells. Excretion is the discharge of metabolic waste products and excess solutes from the body. Elimination is the discharge of undigested or unabsorbed food from the digestive tract. The principal waste products are water, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen wastes. Nitrogen wastes contain nitrogen. Amino acids and nucleic acids, so DNA and RNA, contain nitrogen. When amino acids are broken down in the liver, the nitrogen-containing amino group is removed. The amino group is chemically converted to ammonia, which is then converted to urea. Uric acid is formed from the breakdown of nucleic acids. Urea and uric acid are transported from the liver to the kidneys by the circulatory system. The urinary system consists of the kidneys, urinary bladder, and their ducts, and there's more information about each of these structures on upcoming slides. The principal organs of the urinary system are the paired kidneys, which play a vital role in regulating the volume and composition of body fluids. The kidneys remove metabolic wastes and excess water and salts from the blood and produce urine. The kidneys are two bean-shaped organs in the upper abdomen. They're protected by the lower edge of the ribs. They lie against the back muscles on each side of the spine. Each kidney receives blood from a renal artery and is drained by a renal vein. The hilum is a notch on the medial border of the kidney where the ureters and blood vessels connect with the kidney. The renal capsule is a tough capsule of fibrous connective tissue that covers the kidney. The kidneys consist of an outer renal cortex and an inner renal medulla. The renal medulla contains between 5 to 18 triangular structures, which are known as the renal pyramids. The tip of each pyramid is called a renal papilla. Each renal papilla has several pores, the openings of collecting ducts. Urine passes through each collecting duct through a renal papilla and into a small tube called the minor calyx. Several minor calyxes unite to form a major calyx. The major calyxes join to form a large cavity, which is known as the renal pelvis. As urine is produced, it flows into the renal pelvis. From the renal pelvis, urine passes into the ureter. This is a picture of the kidney anatomy, and you can see the different parts that were discussed previously. Each kidney has over 1 million tiny nephrons. Each nephron is the basic working unit of the kidney. Waste products, excess water and salts, and certain solutes pass into the collecting ducts and eventually leave the body as urine. The main job of the nephrons is to filter the blood and to produce urine. There are two main structures: the renal corpuscle, which filters blood, and the renal tubule, which returns substances needed by the body to the blood. Each renal corpuscle consists of a cluster of capillaries, a glomerulus, there'll be more information on an upcoming slide, which is surrounded by a cup-like structure known as Bowman's capsule. Blood from the renal artery flows into the glomerulus through a small afferent arteriole and leaves the glomerulus through an efferent arteriole. This arteriole conducts blood to a second set of capillaries, which are known as the peritubular capillaries, and they surround the renal tubule. Bowman's capsule has an opening in its bottom through which filtrate passes into the renal tubule. The first part of the renal tubule is the coiled proximal convoluted tubule. After passing the proximal convoluted tubule, filtrate flows into the loop of Henle and then into the distal convoluted tubule. Urine from the distal convoluted tubules of several nephrons drain into a collecting duct. The loop of Henle's job is to reabsorb sodium chloride. This helps regulate water and solute levels. Part of the distal convoluted tubule curves upward and connects the afferent arteriole. The cell that makes this contact forms a juxtaglomerular apparatus. Some of the cells of this apparatus secrete the enzyme renin, which is important in regulating blood pressure. The renal corpuscle, the proximal convoluted tubule, and the distal convoluted tubule of most nephrons are located within the renal cortex. Their loops of Henle may dip down into the outer region of the medulla. Other nephrons have large glomeruli and very long loops of Henle that extend deep into the medulla. Each nephron has a convoluted tubule, which is a tiny coiled tube. Each convoluted tubule has a Bowman's capsule at one end. The capsule partly surrounds a cluster of capillaries called a glomerulus. Blood passes through the glomerulus and is filtered by the capillaries. The fluid part of the blood is squeezed into the Bowman's capsule. The fluid then passes into the tubule. Most of the water and needed substances are reabsorbed by the blood. The rest of the fluid and waste products form urine in the tubule. Urine flows through the tubule to a collecting tubule. All collecting tubules drain into the renal pelvis in the kidney. And this here is a picture of the anatomy of a nephron. And remember, the nephrons are the major working units of the kidney. Ureters are a tube that attach to the renal pelvis of each kidney. They're 10 to 12 inches long, and they carry urine from the kidney to the bladder. Urine is stored in the bladder until the need to urinate is felt. The bladder is a hollow muscular sac. It lies towards the front in the lower part of the abdominal cavity. The urge to urinate occurs when there is approximately 250 milliliters of urine in the bladder. Urine then passes from the bladder through the urethra. The opening at the end of the urethra is called the meatus. Urine passes from the body through the meatus. Urine consists of waste and excess fluids. Glomerular filtration is the first step in making urine. It is the process that your kidneys use to filter excess fluid and waste products out of the blood. Blood flows through the glomerular capillaries under high pressure, forcing more than 10% of the plasma out of the capillaries and into Bowman's capsule. Glomerular filtration is similar to the mechanism by which interstitial fluid, or tissue fluid, is produced as blood flows through other capillary networks of the body. However, blood flows through glomerular capillaries at a much higher pressure than other capillaries. As a result, more plasma is filtered in the kidney and a large amount of glomerular filtrate is produced. Another reason that a large amount of glomerular filtrate is produced is that a highly coiled glomerular capillaries provide a large surface area for filtration. A third reason is the great permeability of the glomerular capillaries. Numerous small pores are present between the endothelial cells that form their walls, making the glomerular capillaries leakier than typical capillaries. The filtrate consists of blood plasma containing ions and small dissolved molecules. Glomerular filtration is not a selective process. Substances needed by the body, such as glucose, amino acids, and salts, are present in the filtrate. Blood cells and proteins are too large to pass through the walls of the capillary and capsule. In fact, when blood cells or proteins do not appear in the urine, they signal a problem with glomerular filtration. The total volume of blood passing through the kidneys is about 1,200 milliliters per minute. Tubular reabsorption is how the urinary system avoids the dehydration threat to homeostasis by returning fluid to the blood. Unlike glomerular filtration, tubular reabsorption is highly selective. Metabolic wastes, surplus salts, and excess water are kept as part of the filtrate and are excreted as urine. Glucose, amino acids, and other needed substances are returned to the blood. In tubular secretion, certain substances are actively transported from the blood in the peritubular capillaries into the filtrate in the renal tubules. Potassium ions, hydrogen ions, ammonium ions, and creatine are secreted into the filtrate. Secretion of hydrogen ions is an important homeostatic mechanism for regulating the pH of blood. Certain medications, such as penicillin, are also removed from the blood by this secretion. Urine passes from the kidneys into paired ureters. The ureters are ducts that transport urine. Urine is forced along through the ureter by peristaltic contractions and is delivered to the urinary bladder. The urinary bladder is a temporary storage sac for urine. It is lined with a mucous membrane that has folds called rugae. The lining and smooth muscle wall permit the bladder to stretch so that it can hold up to 800 ml of urine. The urethra is a duct leading to the outside of the body. So it's kidneys, ureters, urinary bladder, urethra, the toilet. When the volume of urine in the bladder reaches about 250 to 300 milliliters, stretch receptors in the bladder wall are stimulated. These receptors send neural messages to the sacral region of the spinal cord, initiating a urination reflex. This reflex contracts smooth muscle fibers in the bladder wall and also relaxes the internal urethral sphincter, which is a ring of smooth muscle at the upper end of the urethra. These actions stimulate the conscious desire to urinate. The external urethral sphincter is composed of skeletal muscle and can be controlled voluntarily. When the time and place is appropriate, the external urethral sphincter is voluntarily relaxed, allowing urination to occur. However, if the urinary bladder becomes too full, urination may occur despite conscious inhibition. Voluntary control of urination cannot be exerted by an immature immune system. That is why most babies under 2.5 years automatically urinate every time their bladder fills. The healthy adult produces about 1,500 ml of urine per day. The minimum amount of urine to be produced each hour is 30 ml per hour. Healthy urine is sterile. However, urine rapidly decomposes when exposed to bacteria action, forming ammonia and other products. Age, disease, the amount of and kinds of fluids ingested, salt, body temperature, perspiration, and some medications affect urine production. Some substances, such as coffee, tea, alcohol, and some medications, increase urine production. A diet high in salt and some medications cause the body to retain water. When water is retained, less urine is produced. Normal urine is pale yellow, straw-colored, or amber. It is clear with no particles. A faint odor is normal. Red food dyes, beets, blackberries, and rhubarb cause red-colored urine. Brown urine may signal a liver disorder. Certain medications can change urine color. If urine is dark yellow to amber, it indicates dehydration. Cloudy urine can indicate infection. When fluid intake is low, the body begins to dehydrate. As the volume of blood decreases, the concentration of dissolved salts increases. And as its salt concentration increases, the osmotic pressure of the blood increases. Osmotic pressure is the measure of the tendency of a solution to take up water when it is separated by a semi-permeable membrane from a solution with a lower solute concentration. Specialized receptors in the hypothalamus are sensitive to increases in osmotic pressure. When stimulated, these receptors signal the posterior lobe of the pituitary gland to release antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic hormone, or ADH, transmits information from the brain to the distal convoluted tubules and collecting ducts of the kidneys. ADH makes the walls of these ducts much more permeable to water, so more water is reabsorbed into the blood. Blood volume increases, and homeostasis of the fluid volume is restored. Only a small amount of concentrated urine is produced. On the other hand, when a great deal of fluid is consumed, the blood becomes diluted, and its osmotic pressure falls. Release of ADH by the pituitary gland decreases. This reduces the amount of water reabsorbed from the distal tubules and collecting ducts. As a result, a large volume of dilute urine is produced. ADH regulates the excretion of water by the kidneys. Salt excretion is mainly regulated by the hormone aldosterone, which is produced by the adrenal cortex. Aldosterone secretion can be stimulated by a decrease in blood pressure. Aldosterone acts on the kidney tubules, increasing the reabsorption of sodium. When sodium is reabsorbed, water follows by osmosis. As a result, blood volume increases, which raises blood pressure. Aldosterone action results in a lower volume of urine. When blood pressure falls, cells of the juxtaglomerular apparatus secrete the enzyme renin, activating the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone pathway. Renin acts on the plasma protein, converting it to a prohormone called angiotensin 1. An enzyme known as angiotensin-converting enzyme converts angiotensin 1 to its active form, the hormone angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 raises blood pressure directly by constricting blood vessels. It also increases the synthesis and release of aldosterone. This action helps restore extracellular fluid volume and normal blood pressure. An increase in fluid intake can cause an increase in blood volume, which results in an increase in blood pressure. The muscle fibers of the heart are stretched, and in response, they secrete nitric peptides, which are substances that increase sodium excretion by the kidneys. Body fluid is the water in the body and the substances dissolved in it. Fluid constantly moves from one compartment to another. However, in a healthy person, the volume of fluid in each compartment remains about the same. The movement of fluid from one compartment to another depends on blood pressure and osmotic concentration. Blood pressure forces fluid out of the blood at the arterial ends of the capillaries. When it leaves the blood, this fluid becomes interstitial fluid. Some of the interstitial fluid returns to the blood at the venous end of the capillaries as a result of osmotic pressure. Excess interstitial fluid is also returned to the body by the lymphatic system. Fluid movement between the intercellular and the extracellular compartments occurs mainly as the result of changes in osmotic pressure. Normally, fluid intake equals fluid output. Dehydration is when fluid output is greater than fluid intake. Fluid intake is regulated by the hypothalamus. The kidneys are responsible for fluid output. The average daily fluid intake is 2,500 mLs. Most of this fluid is ingested in the foods we eat and the liquids we drink. Water is absorbed from the digestive tract into the blood. Water is also produced during cellular metabolism. Fluid, about 1,500 mLs per day, is excreted primarily by the kidneys. Fluid is also lost through the skin, lungs, and digestive tract. Electrolytes are compounds such as salts, acids, and bases that form ions. Normally, a person obtains adequate amounts of electrolytes in the food and fluid ingested. Most organic compounds dissolved in the body fluid are non-electrolytes, or compounds that do not form ions, for instance, glucose. The electrolyte balance is when the amounts of the various electrolytes taken into the body equal the amounts lost. Sodium is needed to transmit impulses in neurons and muscle fibers. Low sodium ion concentration can cause headaches, mental confusion, rapid heart rate, and low blood pressure. Severe sodium depletion can result in circulatory shock and coma. Potassium is important in nervous and muscle tissue function. Low potassium may cause mental confusion, fatigue, muscle cramps, and an abnormal heart rhythm. High potassium can cause nerve impulses to not be effectively transmitted. Calcium and phosphate are important components of bones and teeth. Chloride helps regulate differences in osmotic pressure between fluid compartments. Chloride is important in pH balance. Finally, magnesium is important in the development of bones and teeth. It plays a role in neural transmission and muscle contraction. Some guidelines to promote normal urination are: provide privacy, take the resident to the bathroom as needed, assist male residents to stand and void, which is another word for urinate. If a resident must use a bedpan, raise the head of the bed to a sitting position, encourage adequate fluid intake, answer call bells promptly, and take the resident to the bathroom every 2 hours. As people age, the kidneys are less effective in filtering waste from the blood. When the kidneys do not filter blood as efficiently, increases in blood pressure may occur. Loss of muscle tone increases the risk of urinary incontinence, especially in women. In men, the prostate enlarges. An enlarged prostate can cause difficulty starting a urine stream. It can cause dribbling between voids, and it can increase the risk of urinary tract infections. And finally, the bladder does not always empty completely in the elderly. When the bladder doesn't empty completely, the risk of UTI or urinary tract infection increases.